Good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for joining today's session on a topic that is essential for safety, compliance, and efficiency in the transport sector, the documentation for the road transport of dangerous goods. Today's topic might sound like paperwork, but trust me, it's the paperwork that saves lives. Every shipment of dangerous goods relies on accurate documentation, and these documents are not just paperwork, they are the critical tools that ensure goods are moved safely, legally, and in line with international and national regulations. In this session, we're going to cover the key types of documentation required for road transport of dangerous goods, the role these documents play, and the common challenges and best practices for accurate and efficient documentation. And so why does documentation matter? Documentation is far more than an administrative formality. It is the backbone of safety, legal compliance, and operational efficiency. Proper documentation ensures that everyone involved, such as the drivers, the logistics teams, the emergency responders, and the regulators, has the information they need about the goods being transported. So what happens when documentation is missing or incorrect? I suppose it's like sending someone on a treasure hunt without a map, except the treasure is the dangerous goods. And when the paperwork isn't right, everything can get messy. Missing or inaccurate documents don't just slow things down, they put people at risk. And without those clear instructions, the chances of spills, the exposure, and accidents shoot up. And it's not just about safety. Regulators can hit you with fines or even criminal charges. Documentation is not a mere formality. It is a critical safeguard for safety, legality, and continuity. The legal framework for transporting dangerous goods by road rests on two pillars: ADR, which harmonises European rules for international carriage, and the UK CDG regulations, which adapt ADR with additional national provisions. These aren't optional guidelines. They are mandatory, and compliance is a shared responsibility across the entire transport chain. Think of ADR as the traffic lights of dangerous goods transport. Ignore them, and you're driving straight into chaos. Carriers have a clear legal duty. Before loading, they must check that all required documentation is in order. Missing or incorrect transport documents, emergency instructions, or even the ADR driver certificate might seem like small oversights, but enforcement agencies treat them seriously. Vehicles can be immobilized for these breaches. Drivers also share this responsibility. Carrying and understanding the correct paperwork is essential because even perfectly packaged and labeled goods can be stopped if the documentation is incomplete. Roadside inspections by the DVSA and a DFT authority frequently lead to journey suspensions and financial losses when paperwork fails to meet ADR standards. Consignors are also held to account. There have been UK prosecutions where transporters face penalties for transporting dangerous goods without proper paperwork, and these cases highlight how absent or flawed documentation triggered official investigations, resulting in fines and reputational damage. Although specific case details are generally absent from public summaries, the pattern is clear in HSC and DVSA enforcement activity. These practices demonstrate that incomplete or incorrect documentation is not a procedural oversight. It routinely leads to enforcement action, legal penalties, operational disruption, even public reporting. Documentation errors are not administrative trifles. They are frequently the first breach cited in regulatory enforcement. Transport documents aren't just paperwork. They are the lifeline of safe and compliant journeys. They travel with the cargo, giving the drivers, the inspectors, and the emergency responders the details they need at a glance. Formats like the UK SIPRO template or the UN Multimodal Dangerous Goods form keep things clear and consistent. But the real rule book is ADR. It dictates what must be included. So why does it matter? Because when documentation is wrong or missing, the fallout can be serious. We know of one UK haulier who was fined £15,000 after moving flammable liquids without any proper documentation. causing an M1 closure and major legal trouble. Mistakes like that just don't delay operations. They can lead to accidents, environmental harm, and big financial penalties. Good documentation isn't about ticking boxes. It's about making sure everyone, from those drivers to the emergency crews, knows exactly what's in the load and how to handle it safely. And when the paperwork is clear, those journeys run smoothly. Compliance checks are quick, and responders can act fast if something goes wrong. So let's look at the following example now to see how essential information is laid out. There is a prescribed format for the information that must be included. The document must include the UN number preceded by the letters UN, the proper shipping name, supplemented when applicable with any technical names, the class and any subsidiary classes, the packing group where assigned, tunnel code, number and description of packages, and the total quantity of each item of dangerous goods. And of course, the name and address of the consignor and consignee. Here's what a completed transport entry looks like. Notice how the details follow a clear, structured order for UN 1993 flammable liquid NOS, toluene and ethyl alcohol, which is Class 3, Packing Group 3 with a tunnel code DE. We have 10 by 10 litre drums with a gross weight of 120 kilos with 100 litres of product. The shipper's declaration is the backbone of compliance and safety in dangerous goods transport. It confirms that every detail from classification to packaging and labelling meets the dangerous goods modal regulations. For road transport under ADR, a signature might not be mandatory, but don't let that fool you. On multimodal journeys involving sea or air, this document becomes a passport for your cargo. And clarity matters. Every detail must be legible and presented in an official language of the forwarding country. If that language isn't English, French, or German, include a version in one of these to avoid confusion and keep international operations running smoothly. In short, the declaration is your guarantee that the cargo is ready for a safe, compliant journey. Supplementary information might sound like the fine print nobody reads, but in dangerous goods transport, it's the VIP section of your paperwork. The dangerous goods note isn't just there to look official, it's packed with details like specific hazards, handling tips, and what to do when things go sideways. Think of it as the survival guide for your cargo. Each class has its quirks. Class 1 explosives. The net mass of explosive content in kilos. The mixed packing includes UN numbers and names in capitals, and if packed together under the mixed packing provisions, the goods of UN numbers listed. Fireworks, the classification by the competent authority with a reference code. Class 2 gases, mixtures in tanks, which would include the percentage composition by volume or mass. Carriage in accordance with 4.1.6.10 for those pressure receptacles for inspection after their expiry date. And for liquefied gases in tanks, declaring the end of the holding time, the date, the month, and the year. Our temperature-controlled substances in Class 4.1 and 5.2, declaring our control temperatures and our emergency temperatures. And in Class 6.2, always declare the name and the telephone number of the responsible person. And finally, for our lithium batteries, you may be asked to supply the UN 38.3 test summary report to accompany a load, especially if you're declaring it under Special Provision 188. Now let's talk about one of the most practical safety tools in ADR compliance, the instructions in writing. Think of this as your cruise emergency playbook, the document that tells them exactly what to do if something goes wrong. It's not optional, and it's not just paperwork. These instructions are designed to save lives and protect the environment when an incident occurs. ADR makes this clear. The format is standardized, that 4-page document listed under ADR 5.4.3.4, and that every crew member must understand it. Why? Because in an emergency, clarity and speed matter. So what's inside? Hazard information for each class of dangerous goods, the immediate actions to take, and the protective equipment required. Carriers have a legal duty here. They must provide the document before the journey, and they have to make sure the crew knows how to use it and keep it in the cab so it's easy to grab when seconds count. And yes, we're in the digital age. Electronic versions are allowed, but there are conditions. Devices must meet those ADR requirements. They must stay charged and unlocked, and paper copies must be available upon request. These instructions in writing are not just a compliance tick box. They are a frontline safety tool that ensures crews are ready to act fast and effectively, protecting the people, the property, and the planet. As we wrap up the core documentation requirements, let's talk about something that often raises eyebrows: the exemptions and derogations. Now, before anyone thinks these are sneaky little loopholes for cutting corners, let's be clear. They're not. They are carefully designed allowances that recognize reality, because sometimes full ADR compliance for every single movement would be like wearing a spacesuit to make a cup of tea. Technically safe, but wildly impractical. The UK has implemented ADR through the Carriage of Dangerous Goods and Use of Transportable Pressure Equipment regulations, which allow for these sensible shortcuts under specific conditions. They help balance safety with practicality, especially for limited quantities, those small amounts packaged to reduce risk, the accepted quantities, those tiny samples or even for small volumes, and even private use derogation. Yep, that paint tin in your boot counts. And national derogations, such as Road Derogation 2, which permits the transport document not to be carried for those loads under ADR 1.1.3.6. The key takeaway here is, even when exemptions apply, safety is non-negotiable. Documentation may need to state the nature of the goods and the basis for the exemption. Because if something does go wrong, "I thought it was exempt," won't impress the enforcement officer. So let's look at the onboard documentation. If you think carrying dangerous goods is stressful, try doing it without the right paperwork. It's like driving blindfolded while juggling flaming torches. So here's your survival kit for the road: the transport document, the DNA of your load. Without it, you're basically saying, "Guess what's in the back?" The instructions in writing, your emergency cheat sheet, 4 pages that could turn panic into a plan. Photo ID, because inspectors like to know they're talking to a human, not a very convincing mannequin. The driver's training certificate, proof you're trained for this job, not just someone who thought hazardous sounded exciting. The vehicle certificate of approval. For tankers and high-risk loads, think of it as your vehicle's VIP pass. The competent authority approval. When you're operating under special rules, these papers say, "Yep, we meant to do that." Now, for 2025, all these documents must now be in the cab, because when inspectors or emergency responders need answers, "Hold on, it's in the trailer somewhere," isn't going to cut it. Though there is an exception. Under MLA 364, the certificate of approval for a trailer can live elsewhere on the unit. But don't get too excited. Everything else stays within arm's reach. Why? Because instant access saves time, and time saves lives. So let's avoid making mistakes that keep our compliance officers awake at night and even make our inspectors sigh dramatically at the roadside checks. These errors might look small on paper, but they can lead to big headaches, delays, and even penalties. So here are the usual suspects. Forgetting the technical names for the NOS entries. So when Special Provision 274 in ADR says include the technical name, it's not a suggestion, it's mandatory. Mixing up the order of information. ADR requires a specific sequence: the UN number, the proper shipping name, the hazard class, the packing group, tunnel codes. Think of it like a recipe. Get the steps wrong, it can collapse. Failing to declare waste or environmentally hazardous materials. If it's waste or hazardous to the environment, say so. Leaving out limited quantity. When we're using the limited quantity exemption, especially in multimodal journeys, the phrase must appear on the transport document. Forget it, and your shipment gets treated like the full ADR blockbuster. Queue delays and extra checks. So why does it matter? Because they're not just clerical quirks. Avoiding them means smoother operations, fewer fines, and less time explaining to inspectors why your paperwork looks like a crossword puzzle. And as we close this presentation, let's remember that documentation isn't just paperwork. It's the lifeline of safe transport. Every form, every signature, every detail is a thread in the safety net that protects people, property, and the environment. Think about this. A single missing phrase can turn a compliant shipment into a regulatory nightmare. One overlooked detail can delay a journey, cost thousands, or worse, put lives at risk. And in the world of dangerous goods, accuracy isn't optional, it's survival. From the transport document and the shipper's declaration to those instructions in writing and the supplementary notes, each piece plays a role in the bigger story: responsibility and trust. These documents speak for you when you can't. They tell those inspectors, the responders, and the regulators that you've done your part. And here's the takeaway. Compliance isn't about ticking boxes. It's about building confidence. Confidence that when something goes wrong, the right information is there, ready to save time, prevent harm, and keep operations moving. So, as you leave today, remember this. Every document you prepare is more than ink on paper. It's a promise of safety, a shield against chaos, and a signal that you take your role seriously. Thank you for your attention and commitment to doing this right. And if you have any questions or need guidance, the BADGP office and our LinkedIn forum are here to help. Because in this business, knowledge shared is risk reduced.
Hello everybody, I'm Richard Masters and we've produced together this presentation on the IMDG code documentation to show you some of the more obvious and some of the less obvious aspects of maritime documentation. We can start really by looking at the size of ships, because this is a sort of significant factor with documentation. And it's interesting to note that one of these large container ships would be, if you took it out of the water and stood it alongside the Grenfell Tower Flats, the ship itself would be 72 meters high, which is 5 meters taller than that block of flats. So this is the sort of equipment that shipping lines are operating these days. Now, if you imagine a ship really is like a floating warehouse, and each of these little boxes here contains is a mini warehouse on itself. So if you add them all together, the whole thing is just one giant floating warehouse. Now, if you were operating a warehouse, you would need to know what you're keeping under your roof, and this is really the role of documentation in terms of shipping. The shipping documentation is an identification of what's in each of these boxes for the shipping line to decide, yes, does it want to take it in the first place, and if it does accept it, where is it going to put it and what's it going to do about it. if it starts to misbehave. So think of it as a warehouse. If you're operating a warehouse of this size, you'd want to know what was in the boxes as well. It's interesting to note also that when you load a container to a ship, no one's going to open the doors and have a look to check that what you've told them is true. So the shipping line very much relies on the information which is on this bit of paper which you're submitting, obviously electronically, which you're submitting to him to say, please accept my cargo, this is what it is. Now the documentation itself, the IATA document, the air document on the left, is not really suitable for maritime. The one on the right, the UN multimodal document, is readily acceptable. It's reproduced in the IMDG code, the same as it's reproduced in ADR, and it works well. And you can download it from the Department for Transport website, and you can use it on as a live document, print it. You can print it, save it, file it, email it, do what you like with it. It's very good. Or you can use the UK CIPRO document, the red one in the middle, all equally acceptable. Some companies produce their own template, but that's not really advisable because the shipping lines will start to look at it and say, well, what is this? They're not really used to looking at documents that aren't standardized like this. Okay, so let's look at the data required on the document. Let's start off with the standard identification of dangerous goods, the UN number to start with, then the proper, which as you'd expect, then the proper shipping name, which you'd also expect, including obviously the technical name for NOS in the normal way. Primary hazard class plus the division, subsidiary hazard class if that's applicable, packing group if a packing group has been assigned. So nothing unusual there. Now we come into unique features of the IMDG code. The flashpoint is included for any substance which is a primary class 3 hazard or a subsidiary class 3 hazard. And it's shown in degrees centigrade CC, which is closed cup. And closed cup is just a way of measuring the instrument they used to determine the flashpoint. It's just a technical laboratory bit of equipment. Then we've got marine pollutant. Now this is again unique to the IMDG code. If a substance is indicated in the IMDG code as a marine pollutant, that must be stated on the document, on the shipping document. So far we've got a UN number, we've got a proper shipping name, we've got a class, subsidiary hazard in brackets in the normal way, packing group in the normal way, 1, 2 or 3. Then we've got the flashpoint in brackets in degrees CC, closed cut. And then if it is a marine pollutant, the words marine pollutant are added at the end. Now, marine pollutant, the significance of marine pollutants is if some of these chemicals get in the sea, they bioaccumulate. And by bioaccumulate, they mean that it gets into the food chain and that the little shrimps absorb the chemical. The little fish eat the shrimps and they absorb the chemical. The big fish eat the little fish and they absorb the chemical. We catch the big fish and eat the big fish and we absorb the chemical, which is not advisable. So as far as possible, anything which is identified as a marine pollutant is identified to the ship and the stevedores so that they can, as far as possible, it's not mandatory, but as far as possible, it's loaded below deck where it can't be washed overboard. Okay, back to standard documentation. Tank containers, empty, unclean tank containers are declared as hazardous in the normal way with the UN number, class, flashpoint for class 3s, etc., packing group. Any substances which are declared as wastes, and there are substances which are declared as wastes which are not necessarily environmentally hazardous. Some of the sort of metal wastes for recycling are declared as wastes, for example. Substances which are transported at an artificially high temperature. So substances which have to be artificially heated to keep them in the molten state are declared as molten, elevated temperature or hot. And this indicates to the ship that it must be stowed in a part of the ship where they can be connected electronically to electric heating elements. Then we've got the identity of the consignor and consignee in the normal way, of course. Right. Shipping lines are very sensitive to anything which might cause a fire on the ship. So class 4.1s, which are heat sensitive or self-reactive, or polymerizing substances, or class 5.2s, organic peroxides, which are self-heating or self-activating. These are regarded as being of particularly high risk at sea. So some substances of this nature are stabilized chemically, which means they have a chemical added to them which inhibits their sensitivity to heat. That chemical is then removed at the point of use, and then it reverts to its original nature. Alternatively, substances can be carried at artificially low temperatures, in which case a refrigerator container is required. This has to be plugged in to the ship's equipment, and a big fridge operates so that it carries the chemical at a preset low temperature. Now that's called the control temperature. The control temperature is the temperature at which the fridge is set. There's also, and that has to go onto the documentation. There's also an emergency temperature, and this has to go onto the documentation because this is the temperature at which it's predicted the chemical will start to react. Maybe going on fire, what they call an exothermic reaction, which may lead to an explosion. So the emergency temperature is the temperature at which the crew have to start taking emergency action. And the purpose for identifying these is so that they can be plugged into temperature controlled equipment, but also so that it can be stowed on the deck where the crew can constantly monitor the temperature, reading the temperature gauges or actually physically monitoring the temperature. Now this is what goes wrong with a 5.2 if you don't take proper care of it. So this was a ship called the YM Mobility in Ningbo in China last year, last summer, and it was organic peroxide, self-reactive organic peroxide, and you can see there's a very lively reaction there. Now there was an investigation, naturally, and what the investigators found was that there was no risk assessment that being done on thermal sensitivity of the product. Okay. Now, if no chemical risk assessment had been done, this is the sort of thing that shipping lines are very, very wary of accepting 4.1s and 5.2s. Also, the investigators noted that no attention was taken to the ambient temperature, which was around 40 degrees centigrade. Very, very hot summer last year. It was very, very, very excessively hot. And it was interesting to note that it was in a reefer container, but the reefer was not, for some reason, not plugged in. And the people concerned relied upon the insulation in the walls of the freight container to prevent the ambient heat from getting at the chemical inside and raising it up to its reactive temperature. Didn't work. Why it wasn't plugged in, I don't know. The report didn't include that. There obviously was a reason, but I'm not party to that reason. Okay, getting back to standard documentation here, folks. The quantity has to be indicated, and unusually for the IMDG, the actual quantity or weight is only in kilos or litres, not gross weight and net weight. Just it says kilos or litres, so it's your option how you declare that. But you must declare the quantity for each separate UN number, proper shipping name, and packing group. So if you've got a substance of different packing groups, each packing group has to be quantified separately. For packaging, the number of packages and the type of packages has to be identified in the normal way, as you'd expect. But in addition, and this is not in the IMDG code, but many shipping lines have made it a commercial requirement that the UN packaging code, 4G for a fiberboard box, 1A1 for a steel drum, 3H1 for a plastic jerry can, for example, has to be included on the dangerous goods note. And if it's not included, they'll reject the booking. Going further than that, for combination packagings, particularly for limited quantities, many shipping lines require a description of the nature and size of the inner packagings. So the number of inner packagings and their individual sizes. Not in the IMDG code, purely a commercial requirement. Another commercial requirement which we're seeing increasingly is shipping lines are requesting the EMS codes. Now, what are the EMS codes? Well, they're called emergency schedule codes. They're listed in the IMDG dangerous goods list, and they're decoded in a third volume of the IMDG code. There are 3 volumes of the IMDG code, and the third volume is called the supplement. And the supplement is carried on board the ships, and it contains medical first aid guide, guide to stowage and segregation on the ships, and it decodes all the emergency schedules. And emergency schedules are F codes for dealing with fires and S codes for dealing with spillages. And each type of chemical, not necessarily each UN number, but each type of chemical has its own F code and its own S code. These are required by increasingly being requested by shipping lines. So we've got a document so far that looks like this. We've got the shipper, Dell Chemicals. We've got the consignee, Mr. Jasco. We've got 60 drums, and I've added in the UN packaging code there. I've included the gross weight and the net weight, but that's not a requirement. You can have the gross weight or the net literage. It doesn't matter which one. Then you've got the UN number, proper shipping name, class, subsidiary hazard in this case, packing group, flashpoint, degrees centigrade, closed cut, and marine pollutant in this case as well. And for that, for good measure, I've added in the EMS codes here, the fire code and the spillage code. Now, we're coming on to legal stuff now, and the legal stuff is this. It starts with this really, the shipper's declaration. So on the dangerous goods note is printed this statement, and you can read it for yourselves, but basically it's saying, I hereby declare. When you're saying I hereby declare, it means this is a legal statement. You can be held to account for what you sign off. So you're legally signing off that you have the packages are properly classified, packaged, marked, labelled in all respects in a proper condition for transport according to all the applicable international and national governmental regulations, wherever that ship goes. Okay, so they've really nailed you to the floorboards with that one. So it's signed, in this case, Jill Smith is the export manager at Dell Chemicals. The place of signature is Halifax. The date of signature is the 13th of the 6th. Okay. So now we have the description, the shipper, consignee, and we've got Jill's signature at the bottom here. And this is the statement that Jill signed up to. Okay, that's the shipper's declaration. That's the actual text. And that appears on every dangerous goods, IMDG dangerous goods declaration. Okay, now we've got another signature which appears on a maritime document, a maritime declaration, and that's the packing certificate. Now this signature can be on a physically separate document, but generally speaking it's on a what they call a combined document these days. It's the signature in the bottom left hand corner here. So whoever packs that container has to sign up to say that he's packed it and all the packages are in good sound condition, nothing's leaking, all the drums have been stood upright, everything's been safely packaged and secured. And securing is a key thing. When you're loading into a vehicle or container for sea, the securing is a very important aspect of preventing things going wrong. The packages can rock and roll and slide around inside a container or vehicle. They're liable to, the packaging is liable to be broached, the chemicals come out, and if the chemicals mix, then problems arise. So the securing of chemicals, so they can't, the packages rather, so they can't physically move in the container, is the primary task of the person who's packing the container. And again, that's signed by the person in charge of the operation, Mr. Packer in this case, and he signed that with his warehouse for Star Logistics, signed in Halifax on the 9th of the 10th. Okay, now what else the packer includes is the container number, okay, container ID number, or if it's a lorry, the vehicle registration number, the security seal number to say that I've now sealed it and nobody can go in here until such time as it arrives at its destination. The type of vehicle or the type and size of container, the tare weight, which is the weight of the empty container, plus the total gross weight of the container. And we'll come back to this later, the verified container gross mass. This is if you take the container and put it on a weighbridge, that's the figure you come up with. In this case, 15 tons. Okay, now let's have a look at what the carrier does with this data. You present the data to the local booking office, and they will either offer you a provisional acceptance, or they'll give you an immediate rejection and say, no, we can't take that. Or they'll say, yeah, we probably can, but we need to do some further checks, so we'll give you a provisional acceptance. So, taking it on from the provisional acceptance, the carrier will check the segregation compliance within the container or vehicle. And by that I mean, does the segregation of the dangerous goods inside meet with the segregation requirements of the IMDG code? Now, this is all well and good. If it doesn't, they'll say, sorry, you'll have to sort this segregation out, we can't accept that. And that's well and good if you've got time to do it. If the if the shipping line does this check a week before, 2 weeks before, that's perfect. If they do it 12 hours before the ship arrives, you've got no chance of actually correcting that segregation. You've got no chance to take out the offending articles and reseal the container or vehicle. So your consignment is going to miss the ship. Okay. Another check that the shipping line would do is check for dangerous goods restrictions in various ports of call or ports of transshipment, because there are certain ports that have limitations on the nature and quantities of dangerous goods that are on particular ships passing through their ports. So let's assume all is well. Let's assume that the shipping line accepts your cargo, and when it's accepted, the carrier will say, right, I'm going to put that container or vehicle in this particular position on the ship. And they give that to the stevedores, and the stevedores will load it in that specific slot on the ship. Okay, now that's done to create segregation distances, and also to group all the containers together that are going to be discharged in one particular port. The ship will then create a dangerous cargo manifest, and it looks like this. Well, it looked like this in the olden days. Of course, it's all electronic these days, but basically the dangerous goods manifest is a list of all the containers or vehicles that contain all the dangerous goods. So the stowage position, where it is on the ship, the booking reference, the marks and numbers, so the container ID number or the vehicle registration number, the UN number, or numbers if there's more than one, proper shipping name or names, the class and the subsidiary hazards if they're applicable, the packing groups, the any additional information, marine pollutant, flash point, controlled temperature, etc., the number and type of packages, and the quantity. And tucked away in the corner here, the EMS code, the F code and the S code. There's two reasons that this serves two functions these days. This document is the thing that the ship will turn to if they're at sea and there's a particular problem with a particular container. They'll know from the stowage position, by checking this list, they can find out what's in any particular container in any position on the ship. So that's essential. But also they transmit this entire document to the next port of call before the ship arrives. And that's a requirement of the port. Okay, that's for security, and it's also for dealing with emergency response should there be a problem of fire or spillage on the ship. The port will know what kind of problems they're going to be faced with. Okay, so back to legal for a second here now. The information that you put on your dangerous goods document doesn't stay there. It gets moved onto the bill of lading. Now the bill of lading is a receipt given by the shipping line to the owner of the cargo when the ship has loaded it. When it's on the ship, there's a receipt given, and this document is a receipt from the shipping line to the owner of the cargo. Now this receipt is in some cases what they call a negotiable document. So the shipper can actually sell this product on the basis of proof of ownership, which is this bill of lading, to a third party. And this is the document that changes hands when a cargo is sold at sea, which is not uncommon. So this information has to be correct, not only from the point of view of the ship safety, but also from the point of view of the person buying it. He's got to know exactly what he's buying. So if the information is not as, if the product is not as declared on here, or the declaration is different to what he's actually going to get, you've got a legal situation. You're faced with a legal situation with the buyer of the cargo. Okay, that's all we need to say about legal stuff on that point. But it is an issue you need to remember, that this information becomes part of the legal transaction. Okay, so back to more practical things now. Given that we know, or the ship will know what dangerous goods are in each individual container. This is a stow plan for a container ship, and it looks like a scan, a sort of medical scan, take slices through the ship from the front to the back. Okay. So different colours are different ports, and the letters inside indicate different classes. So you can see, you probably can't see, but this says 5.1, this says 6.1, this says 3, 3, 9, 8, 3, 8. So the classes of dangerous goods are identified on the ship's stowage plan. Now, certain types of dangerous goods have to be, according to the IMDG code segregation rules, a minimum distance, a physical distance apart on the ship. So the ship uses the information from your dangerous goods declaration to make sure that when he's loading his dangerous goods, he's not putting dangerous goods that should be separated from each other on the ship next to each other or one on top of the other. They are physically separated to the required safe distances. And again, we look at this one, 5.2. This would not be stowed below deck for obvious reasons. If this did go wrong below deck, then it would be a much more significant hazard than what it was here. Okay, this is bad enough, but if it had happened below deck, it would have been a serious issue. This one should have been plugged in anyway, probably, in which case the reefer plugs are going to be on the deck in most cases. Not all cases, but in most cases. Now, just to draw your attention back to the declared verified gross weight of the container. Why is this significant? This is significant because up until a while ago, this scenario was happening a lot on big container ships. As the ships got bigger, the deck stacks got higher and higher. And you can imagine, really, this is sheer physics. This is the pendulum effect. If you had a 25 or 30 ton container at the top of this stack, and imagine the ship was rolling from side to side. As the ship rolls, the container stack rolls with it. As the ship rolls back the other way, if you've got a lot of weight in the top of these stacks, the stack wants to continue rolling in the direction of the pendulum. And it's putting excessive stress on the containers at the bottom of the stacks. And because of the angle of the stress on one side of the container, it overloads the walls of the strength of the walls on one side of the container. That wall collapses, and then the whole stack collapses like this. So we've now got regulations which say that the ship has to be told what the weight is of each container within plus or minus 5% either way, or 500 kilos either way. Okay. So containers are weighed at the ports these days, and if the weight turns up to be significantly different from the weight which is declared on the documentation, then either the documentation has to be amended or the cargo doesn't get loaded. Okay. So here it is. This is the verified container gross mass. Now, who's responsible for that? Well, it's got to be the packer, isn't it? The packer's got to be responsible for that. And he's either got to run his vehicle over a weighbridge and deduct the weight of the vehicle, or he's got to weigh every pallet that goes into the container and then tot up the weight of the pallets and add the weight of the empty container. So there's two ways of doing that. Now, if this is wrong and there's a problem arising from that being wrong, who's responsible? Well, the shipper has appointed the container packer, so it's a joint responsibility. The packer is the primary source of the problem, but the shipper is also responsible because the packer is operating under the control and at the behest of the shipper. Now, this is a ship which capsized while it was being loaded with containers. Now, why it capsized, I don't actually know, but there have been recorded cases of ships assuming that containers are either empty or very light, and they've turned out to be either very heavy or full. In which case, this scenario can be achieved very easily with a ship as small. This is a very small ship. It's a little feeder ship, very small, and it looks to me as if, and I'm not sure the actual details on this ship, but it looks to me as if there were misdeclared weights of containers potentially, and that unbalanced the ship, and it overcame the stabilizing equipment in the ship. Ships can do a certain amount of stabilizing by pumping water in tanks from side to side, but there's a limit to what they can achieve. And the smaller the ship, the more they're susceptible to this. Excuse me. Okay, so now we're moving on to a more active kind of risk. I say more active because the shipping lines are more sensitive to accepting cargoes that can lead to a fire than any other types of dangerous goods. And you all know from your your knowledge of dangerous goods which types of chemicals can go on fire. And it's not only 4.1s and 5.2s; it's also some of the 6s, some of the 8s, and the 3s. Obviously, will, if they go off, they're going to add fuel to the fire. So one of the interesting things about container ship fires is that once containers start burning, it's very difficult to put water on them to actually get to the seat of the fire. And the other thing is how flimsy containers are, and how quickly the floors burn out, because they're only timber floors, and how quickly the sidewalls melt out because it's very, very thin metal. Okay, they look massively strong when they're sitting on the truck as it trundles off from your warehouse, but actually they're not. And when they're all bundled together like this and they're involved with extreme heat, they soon disintegrate. So looking at some statistics here, you can read these for yourselves, but there have been 126 major container ship fires since 2005, okay, which has led to fatalities and a lot of serious injuries. This year, this summer alone, there have been all of these incidents. This ship here is the One High 503, which caught fire. And if you Google this one, there's a whole series of photographs about this, and the final photograph, the whole ship has burnt out. It's barely afloat. It's burnt from the front to the back. It's just totally gone. So this is why shipping lines are very, very, they scrutinise to a very great degree dangerous goods declarations if they believe there's anything which is either a fire starter or a fire invigorator, shall we say. So segregation is an important factor. Segregation is not something which you have to be concerned with ADR at all, apart from explosives. But with IMDG code, segregation between chemicals in containers or on vehicles going on ferries is a major issue, as is when they get on the ship, as is segregation between containers when they're stowed on the ship. So looking at it from your point of view, first of all, if you're looking at you've got different containers, you've got different chemicals, and you say, can I put these in the same container because they're going to the same party? Well, there's a segregation table which indicates segregation between classes. It's in part 7.2 of the IMDG code, and it says, for example, that class 6 and class 8 can generally speaking go together. But these two are both class 8s, but if you look in detail in the dangerous goods list, there are factors which say, although they're both class 8s, they cannot be packed together in the same container. The reason for that is one is an acid, which is a class 8, and one is an alkali, which is a class 8. And acids and alkalis, if they mix together, there is a very violent chemical reaction, which can lead to a major fire. So, although despite the fact they're both class 8s, they cannot go in the same container. Now, the way you find that out is by looking in the dangerous goods list. One of the issues really with this segregation of individual substances is the NOSs. If you looked at the NOS for toxic liquids, class 6 toxic liquid UN 2810 NOS, class 6.1, and you looked at UN 1760 NOS corrosive liquid, happy days, class 6s can go with class 8s. Okay. So on a class basis, yes, they can. But with NOSs, it's rather complicated because you have to look at the individual substances that are in that NOS mixture. So if we had, for example, this one, benzonitrile, okay, class 6, can it be packed with fumaryl chloride, class 8? Well, the segregation table says class 6 and can be packed with class 8. However, if we look at these individual substances, in the IMDG code, it says benzonitrile has a segregation code SG35, STO separated from acids. Fumaryl chloride, UN 1780, is assigned segregation group 1, SGG1, acids. This is STO separated from acids. This is an acid, therefore, although this is a class 6 and this is an 8, these two chemicals are what they call incompatible and cannot be stowed together. Okay, so how do you deal with that on the documentation? This is where it does get a bit intricate. Where you've got NOSs which are incompatible, not because of the classes, but because of the individual substances which are in the mixtures of those classes, IMDG 7.2.53 says, it is recognised that not all substances, mixtures, solutions or preparations falling within a segregation group are listed in the IMDG code by name. In other words, the NOSs are not listed in the segregation groups. These are the ones which are shipped under NOS entries. So although the NOS entries in themselves are not listed in the segregation group, so the NOSs do not have individual segregation requirements, the consignor shall decide, based on the chemicals that are in those NOS mixtures, whether the inclusion under a segregation group is appropriate, in which case he shall mention that fact in the transport document. So this is not if he feels like it. Shall means must in legal terms. So if these chemicals, just go back a click, can't go back a click. If these chemicals are incompatible, then they cannot go together in the same container, even though the NOS classes says they can. Okay, that was all rather complicated. So just to cheer you up a little bit, limited quantities documentation and accepted quantities documentation is very much more easy. So for limited quantities and accepted quantities, you need a dangerous goods declaration in the normal way. So you state the UN number, class, packing group, subsidiary hazard, packing group, flash points, if it's a class 3, marine pollutant, if it's a marine pollutant, even though it's even though it's limited quantities, or if it even even if it's in accepted quantities. What you do then is, for limited quantities, you add the words limited quantities, or you can abbreviate that to LTD QTY, or you can say dangerous goods in accepted quantities. Okay, and you add that to the dangerous goods declaration. Okay, so there are no exceptions for documentation in the IMDG code. Remember, no exemptions for small loads. The white van rules don't apply. No exemptions for limited quantities. No exemptions for accepted quantities. Everything must have a document. Okay, folks, well, we're there now. This is it. So if you do all that, you get all that right, then the shipping line will be happy to receive your booking. And we know now what's in the box because you've told them what's in the box and they're going to be happy with that. Okay, so thank you for your attention, everybody. I hope you find this interesting. And if there are any questions, they will come back to me via the good offices of BADGP. Okay, thank you very much.
Good day, and thank you very much to BADGP for letting me make this presentation on IATA documentation to you. So what we're going to cover today is the IATA document's purpose. We'll go through the airway bill, AWB for short. We'll go through the shipper's declaration for dangerous goods, DGG for short, the dangerous goods checklist, and also the notification to captain, NOTOC. So as you can see in the air side of things, we like our abbreviations. So the purpose of the IATA documentation, it can be summed up in one word, which is safety. On a passenger aircraft, our passengers are probably blissfully unaware of the DG that lies underneath their seats in the cargo hold. But no need to worry, all the DG will have been handled to exacting standards by all involved. Our documentation must therefore validate compliance, prevent incidents, and facilitate clear communication across the transport chain. So the key documents in DG by Air, we've got an airway bill, and apologies, this is not a great example, but this will be the document that will be issued by the forwarder generally, and it's the contract between the shipper and the actual carrier involved. After the airway bill, we've got the shipper's declaration, which is the DGD, and there's a few formats possible for the DGD. So firstly, there's the one with the columns, and this is you can see that everything's nicely in boxes, and especially down here where you put the UN and the proper shipping name, this is all in columns for us. The next one is without columns for the UN number, the proper shipping name, etc. And this is more for use with computers. And then finally we got the XSDG XML message, which the forwarder or ground handling agents can actually send this message between each other to actually convey the dangerous goods details. So 3 possible formats there. So after our 3 possible DGD formats, we move on to the DG checklist. So this would be used by the either the carriers, or if they've subcontracted their services out to the GHA, they will use this document to check each shipment as it comes into the warehouse. So basically there's several questions that have to be answered, and if any questions are answered no, then the shipment would have to be rejected. So we've got some general questions there, some questions about the identification, the quantity type and type of packing, and also we have to check the correct packing instructions, any authorizations, any additional handling information, and also on the airway bill itself we have to check that the relevant statements are actually present. So after the dangerous goods checklist, next key document we've got to look at is the NOTOC, which is the notification to captain. So once the dangerous goods shipment has been accepted by the carrier or its ground handling agent, and then it's been built up accordingly on a ULD, then the dangerous goods information will be conveyed to the captain by use of this NOTOC form. And as you can see, most of this is fairly self-explanatory. So station of unloading, the airway bill, proper shipping name, the class, the UN number, number of packages, the net quantity per package, the packing group, the cargo imp codes. So we have our own 3-letter codes for each class or division of DG. The ERG, which is the emergency response code. So that's in case anything happens in flight, the pilots have a manual, they look up exactly what to do. And then there'll be an indication here if it's a cargo aircraft only shipment, any special provisions, and then the unit load device which the item's loaded on as recorded here, and then finally the position on the aeroplane will be recorded as well. And usually there's a few people have to sign this, so the person building the pallet up would sign it, and the loading supervisor loading the actual ULD on the aeroplane would sign here, and then finally the captain would sign there. So one copy of the note will go forward on the flight, and the other one will be retained at the station of departure for at least 3 months. So next, let's look at a scenario where we have an airway bill and no actual dangerous goods declaration is needed. So all dangerous goods by air shipment will definitely have an airway bill. However, for some items, it's sufficient to make a declaration for the DG on the airway bill itself, and that's per 8012 in the dangerous goods regulations, and therefore no DGD is needed. So just running through the UNs involved, 3164, 3164, so for pressurized pneumatic as opposed to pressurized hydraulic. UN 3373, so biological substance. UN 1845, our favourite carbon dioxide solid dry ice. UN 3245, genetically modified organisms. And also some lithium battery scenarios. And then also UN 2807, which is magnetized material. So continuing on our theme of where an airway bill is sufficient to make the dangerous goods declaration, a couple of examples here for you. So we got a shipment of UN 1845, so carbon dioxide solid, that's the proper shipping name. So we show the UN number, proper shipping name, and we've got 2 boxes at 40 kilos, and we show the net quantity per box. And then the next example down here is we got dental kits, which is dangerous goods in accepted quantities, 1 package. So actually here we got 4 pieces, but because there's accepted quantity and non-dangerous goods in the same airway bill, you have to actually specify how many of the total packages are dangerous goods. So in this case, out of the 4 packages, 1 package is accepted quantity, and unlike IMDG, you don't actually have to do a DGD. This is sufficient. So carrying on with the key documents in DG by air, where we do require a DGD, then on the associated airway bill, we would have 1 or 2 statements. If it's an OK passenger shipment, then the statement is dangerous goods as per associated shipper's declaration. On the other hand, if it's a cargo aircraft only shipment, then the statement should read dangerous goods as per associated DGD, cargo aircraft only. So 2 types of declarations possible. Okay, let's get into the completion of the DGD itself. So first of all, we need to put the shipper and the consignee in the relevant boxes as per 8.161 and 8.162 of the DGR regulations. Then we need to put the number of pages, so page 1 of 1, and people do get a little bit tripped up by this, especially when they first start raising shippers' declarations. Then the next thing we have to put on is the, or actually delete the non-applicable, usually, is we have to let people know whether it's an OK passenger and cargo aircraft shipment or a cargo aircraft only shipment. So you delete the non-applicable. So in this case, it's passenger and cargo aircraft have been deleted, meaning that this is a cargo aircraft only shipment. And then the next bit down here is you have to delete the non-applicable. So if it's a radioactive shipment, then we delete non-radioactive. But as this is a non-radioactive shipment, then we would delete radioactive, as has been done there. Okay, carrying on with how to fill in the shipper's declaration. So the next part is the nature and quantity of dangerous goods. So step 1 would be to put in the UN or ID number. So we have UN 2924 in this case. Step 2 would be to put the proper shipping name, including a technical name for NOS entries. So we've got flammable liquid corrosive NOS. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. And then the next step is to put in the class. So we have class 3. Step 4 is to put in the subsidiary hazard class, or division number, so 8 in this example, and the final part of this bit is to put in the applicable packing group. So I've got packing group 2 in this example. Continuing then with DGD completion, we come to sequence 2, which is the number and type of packagings and the quantity of DG. So we're looking for the number of packaging of the same type and content, the type of packaging, and the net quantity per package. So in this one we have a very straightforward example. So one fiberboard box, and you can put the box code in there if you want, you don't have to. And then the net quantity per package. So we have one fiberboard box, 4G, with a total of 5 litres per package. The next part of the DGD completion, sequence 4, relates to authorizations, which is step 9. So if any of these if the goods are moving under any of these special provisions listed here, then a record of this or this special provision number has to be endorsed in the authorization column of the DGD. Also, moving under an A1 or A2, a statement that the approval or exemption is attached to the DGD. And then there's a few sort of specialized ones about portable tanks, and if the packagings are authorized under 5.067, some other stuff relating to organic peroxides and self-reactives, and finally, if moving under 3.016. So you deal with it with A, but the other ones would be very rare you would come across those. So the final piece of the jigsaw regarding DGD completion we cover now. So there's additional handling information, and that's spelt out in 81611. So normally you put the 24-hour emergency contact down there. The certification statement, 8.1612, that's there. Occasionally I've seen it wrong, but very, very rare. And then we have the name of the signatory, so Mike Ide in this case, the date, so 29th of October, and then most important that the person raising the DGD has actually signed it. As regards additional information, there's also some other cases where you may need to put specific information on there. So for organic peroxides, samples of organic peroxides, if you've got chemical oxygen generators, infectious substances and controlled substances, firework classification reference, and then also if you're using the viscous flammable liquids special provision, you need to put that on any additional information as well. So that was rather a lot to take in, so might be helpful if we had a recap. So in terms of the documentation, we had the airway bill, which would be raised by the forwarder usually. We had the shipper's declaration for dangerous goods, the DGD, which would be raised by the shipper. We had the dangerous goods checklist, which would be used by the operator or the ground handling agent. And then finally, we had the notification to captain, the NOTOC, which would be issued by the operator or the ground handler and given to the captain to sign. So as regards the airway bill extracts, if you remember, some items we don't actually need a shipper's declaration, so you can declare the dangerous goods on the airway bill itself and that would be sufficient. So we had the example of the dry ice. On the other hand, if the item does require a shipper's declaration, then you would need the necessary statement endorsed on the airway bill, and we had dangerous goods as per associated shipper's declaration, or and if it was cargo aircraft only, it would have the cargo aircraft only remark after it. Then we had the shipper's declaration for dangerous goods, the DGD. We ran through what needs filling in on there. So shipper, consignee, the transport details, delete the non-applicable aircraft type, and then delete the non-applicable shipment type. So we deleted the radioactive because it's a non-radioactive shipment. And then in the nature of quantity of dangerous goods, we went through UN number, the proper shipping name, the class or division, sub-risk if subsidiary hazard, sorry, if applicable, the packing group, the quantity and type of packing. So we had the one fiberboard box, 4G with 5 litres, and then we had the packing instruction there, and we may need to have some sort of authorizations from time to time as well. Continuing with the Shipper's Declaration for Dangerous Goods, the DGD, we mentioned about the additional handling information, which would usually be the 24-hour emergency contact, but there could be other things needed there in certain scenarios. We have the declaration there on the left, name of the signatory, date of the signature, and most important, the actual signature itself. So that was the actual DGD for you. Getting into the recap of the dangerous goods checklist, we mentioned that the first 7 questions are general questions about the top half of the form, and then after that we have to check the identification, UN numbers, proper shipping name, classes, subhazards, packing group, then the quantity and type of packing. So we went through, check the number and type of packages, the quantity and unit of measure, and then there's some additional information needed for explosives. And then also we have to check the packing instructions for correctness. Any authorizations that are needed, we need to check those. Any additional handling information needed, and the name of the signatory and date indicated, and the signature of the shipper needs to be checked. And the airwayable information itself, the statement, dangerous goods as per associated shipper's declaration, or you can have it dangerous goods as per associated DGD. Cargo aircraft only if applicable, and where non-dangerous goods are included, the number of pieces of dangerous goods is shown. Getting into the recap of the notification to captain, the NOTOC form. So we mentioned that most of the fields are self-explanatory, so station of unloading, the airway bill number, the proper shipping name, the class, the UN or ID number, subhaz if applicable, the number of packages, the net quantity per package and the unit, the packing group, the cargo imp code, and the emergency response drill code, and also you'd probably see the ULD ID and the position on the aircraft as well. So if we ensure that our documentation is in order, we will hopefully avoid tragedies like the ValueJet crash of 1996. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I hope you found it useful. And if there's any questions, I believe you'll send them to the office and they will be circulated to us to answer.